Hello, everyone. I'm Bill Modrow. I'm head of special collections and university archives here at Miami University. And I want to welcome you all as Miami University Libraries continue to honor and celebrate Black History Month with our month-long series of programs. Today's lecture, White on Black in Camelot, is based on Laverne Merritt-Gordon's powerful memoir, Tell Them What They Want. She co-authored with Bo Groskop, and the book depicts Merritt-Gordon's coming-of-age story in Oxford during the 50s to the 70s. First, I want to thank those involved in this important series, especially Jackie Johnson, University Archivist, and Sean Burness, our communication specialist, for helping organizing this series. Before I introduce our speakers, I want to read Miami University's land acknowledgement and our statement on racism. Miami University is located within the traditional homelands of the Miami and Shawnee people, who along with other indigenous groups ceded these lands to the United States in the first Treaty of Greenville in 1795. The Miami people, whose name our university carries, were forcibly removed from these homelands in 1846. In 1972, a relationship between Miami University and the Miami Tribe of Oklahoma began and evolved into a reciprocal partnership, including the creation of the Miami Center at the Miami University in 2001. The work of the Miami Center serves the Miami Tribe community and is dedicated to the revitalization of the Miami language and culture and to restoring that knowledge to the Miami people. Miami University and the Miami Tribe are proud of this work, and of the more than 140 Miami students who have attended Miami University since 1991 through the Miami Heritage Award Program. Miami University's libraries are statement on racism. The libraries are a welcoming, inclusive, and safe resource for every person in our community. We believe that Black Lives Matter, racism, violence, discrimination, oppression, and hatred are antithetical to our values, mission, and fundamental humanity. It will not be tolerated in any libraries, affiliated spaces, or services. We at the libraries must continue to listen, learn, and better understand injustice and the experience of others in order to truly be welcoming and inclusive resource for all. And we are dedicated to doing the work necessary to be better allies of and advocates for the victims of injustice. Now it is my honor to introduce our speakers. Laverne Merritt-Gordon was born in Lincoln Heights, Ohio, one of 16 children. She lived in New Miami, Ohio until the age of 6 when the state sent her to live in Oxford. She graduated from Talawanda High School here in Oxford and earned her BS from Miami University and a master's in science from Purdue University. She's retired after a great career in health science. She now lives in Jacksonville, Florida with her husband, Demon P. Gordon, and where she is active in the Florida's Democratic Party politics and is dedicated to her sons and her grand and great-grandchildren. Tell Them What You Want is her first book. Bo Groskop, who also grew up in Oxford, Ohio, was a son of a Miami University professor. He also graduated from Talawanda High School in Oxford, and he earned his BS from Ohio University and a PhD in international relations from the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Retiring after 40 or probably over 40 years in teaching, he is currently Professor Emeritus at California State University, Chico. His coursework and writings are on international racism, global patriarchy, international political economy, politics of terrorism, and U.S. foreign policy. He lives in Chico, California, is active in leftist politics and his son's well-being. Tell Them What You Want is his fifth book. So please post your questions into the Q&A and the speakers will answer after their presentations. I now turn it over to our distinguished speakers.
Love and honor. Good afternoon. Bo and I would like to thank Miami University Library for the invitation to participate in their Black History program and showing an interest in Tell Them What You Want. For many years, 70 some years to be exact, Bo and I have established and maintained a great friendship. We lived in the same town, our homes no farther than a quarter of a mile apart. We witnessed the same events and knew many of the same people. However, our experiences on a personal basis was very different regarding race, class, and sex. Bo was a white professor's son, and I was a Black fostered state child. The individual differences do help us to understand the different experience, but we believe that there's more to it than that, especially as it relates to Oxford and Miami University. That's why the title White on Black Camelot, as the dictionary defines Camelot, as a place of glittering romance, optimism, of idealized beauty, peacefulness, and enlightenment was used. So our thesis is that the imaging or depiction of Oxford as Camelot was and is a carefully drawn and decisive white construct, resulting in the masking of racist reality to the economic, sociological, political, and psychological benefits of Oxford's white citizens. Although my book addresses and shares many different events and accounts of my life, and confronted a class-based and patriarchal environment, our focus today is on how and why the Camelot imagery affected race and racism, in particular, the masking of both.
Thank you, Laverne, and thank you everybody for joining us today and celebrating Laverne's life in Oxford and elsewhere, and the book that she was so kind to be a part of. I want to go back to the point about Camelot. If anyone has any doubt that Camelot imagery that she read to us is still not in operation, Miami, that is to say, Oxford was just selected as the Ohio representative in a list of the best small warm towns. And if you look at the language used, you can see the parallels. I want to make clear also that we're not talking about the fact that Oxford is unique in this endeavor. Every small town and even city or even nation state puts its best foot forward all the time for public consumption. What we are saying, however, is that the use of an Camelot imagery is obviously part of what has been developed and used historically to describe Oxford, Ohio. When people ask me where I grew up or tried to grow up, let's say in my case, I say I grew up in Camelot, because in fact, that imagery is so strong and so powerful that it does make Oxford unique in that sense among elite towns who use that construct. But it's not a question of kind, it's a question of degree. The fact is that the imagery of Camelot has been a great benefit to the city of Oxford, the town of Oxford, as an atypical town. The fact is that it has drawn people to live here, to work here, to play here, and in fact, to retire here. It's what brought the Groscup family in 1951 to Oxford and to Miami University. We knew, or were told, and it turned out to be true for our family, that it's a wonderful place to live. In fact, the people on Silver Lane, many of our neighbors retired here because they understood the celebration and the imagery of Oxford as a very nice place to live and to work. In fact, this image is so powerful that even though white conservatives and liberals have a difficult time agreeing on anything, they do agree and help sustain this imagery of Oxford. Why not? It's a very nice place to live for us. And so that why would we look in any place deeper? Why would we look around and say, well, what problems are here? So when my dad put up the Confederate flag underneath the American flag in our backyard, I didn't raise any questions. I didn't even know anything how the other, as we say, felt about that. Or when he put the jockey up on our front steps to welcome people. It wasn't until Laverne and her friends said, we didn't know you were like that, because I had no understanding. I didn't look any deeper. The schools weren't teaching anything about that jockey or the Confederate flag. So it just seemed normal to us. So why would we look any deeper? And finally, the fact is that Oxford, Ohio has used this imagery to project the notion of Oxford being an island amidst a sea of poverty and crime. All we have to do is look at J.D. Vance's book that basically is class warfare on the working poor outside of Oxford. He grew up in Middletown, Ohio. It's only 20 miles away. Well, what he really did was paint a very different picture than what is painted for Oxford, Ohio. So that matters in terms of people coming to Oxford and to Miami University. In fact, one of the things that Laverne talks about in Tell Them What You Want is when she goes out into that area, out to Hillsborough, and tries to get into a church and finds that it's a very different place than Oxford, Ohio. And she's going to tell us about that adventure right now.
That was some experience. In Oxford, I had been allowed, or you were allowed to go to any white church, although you knew that you really wasn't welcome. But when I went to Hillsborough and I wanted to go into that church, I was drawn to that church. And they told me that I couldn't come in. And so I was still persistent, but finally, after shaming the pastor, telling him that I was a child of God and the house was God's house, and that God wouldn't like it very much if I could not come into his house. So he ended up letting me come into the house, to his house, to see the church. There were other forms of overt racism. And by the time that Bo and I got to Oxford, the segregation was beginning to disappear. So, and what I mean by that, there had been segregation in the public swimming pools up until 1950, in the restaurants, that was until early 50s, in the McGuffey School until the year of 1963. But there were other unofficial segregations in movie theaters, public services, employment, business locations, and bank discriminations. By the early 1950s, things had started to shift largely to subtle forms of Jim Crow racism to be hidden in plain sight. For example, me sitting on top of the hillside, or sitting on the hillside at the public swim pool. And of course, I wanted to go in. My friends, I wanted to go in, and I was telling them that. And they told me they don't want you to go in. And of course, I want to know why. And so they said, it's because they consider us as dirty and greasy. And every time we would go in or could go in or would go in, that they would have to clean the pool because it was dirty and it would be dirty and greasy. And then in regards to McGuffey School, well, they just kept moving the goal. And they were saying that it was because their student teachers that they were training, they were going to be going off and teaching in white schools. So why would they have to teach the Black students? So to practice on Black students. So that was annoying. And then you had Mother's Restaurant that opened in 1970. And that took a long time, 1970, to get a Black restaurant. But it was exciting for us. It was a place for us, when I say us, to go and feel relaxed. But still, there's still something going on. And I will say that in this next example. Whenever I would go shopping, it didn't matter what store it was in. This is uptown. There would always be questions following you around. What do you want? What can I do for you? Do you have enough money to buy whatever it is that you want to buy? And throughout all of this, it just seemed like you're just constantly being watched, and you certainly knew that you were not welcome. Although they said that you could come in by law, you could come in, but you knew that you wasn't welcome. You could feel that. It's like cutting it with a knife. You knew that you were not welcome. In regards to going to high school and discussing things as far as classes with my counselor, our counselors encouraged the Black students, with myself included, to take general subjects such as general math and general science, because they assumed that we were not going to college. And again, I can't emphasize enough that feeling that I had throughout growing up, that you can come in, you can do something, you can participate, but you're really not welcome, or they don't see you as being welcome. This was everywhere. In some, Camelot image resulted in hiding the experiences of Black citizens. Therefore, Bo's, in my view, and knowledge about non-Camelot Black life in Oxford are different.
So I want to bring Miami University into this conversation. Camelot also served as a central imagery for Miami University, and had an effect on the Black students at Miami University, particularly those beginning in the mid to late 60s who began to challenge the Camelot imagery and to try to get a greater presence on campus for Black students and Black faculty and Black administration. If anyone has any doubt about the Camelot imagery used for Miami University, I just watched a short film, I think it's on YouTube, from Miami University, in which it entitled 5 Things to Consider Before You Come to Miami University. And there I learned that, for one thing, the Miami food services have the best food in the country among all campuses. The second thing I learned, for example, was that if you engage in going on the Miami University Abroad program to Luxembourg, why, you will be housed and study in a castle. And there's nothing more that epitomizes Camelot than a castle. And of course, it talks about the idyllic Georgian architecture. So if you're into Georgian architecture, hopefully you are in Miami, then you're going to be well served. One of the things that, by the way, I want to make sure that everybody understands that today you are meeting Laverne Merritt-Gordon, who was one of the early activists in the effort to bring to Miami University Black studies programs and Black faculty and Black administration. And she was a very active member, as it's detailed in Tell Them What You Want. As she says, we had to protest and protest and protest some more to get our point across and to get some movement on these issues. And one of the more notorious events that happened during this period was called the Great Flush-In. And there's lots of myths about who was responsible for the Great Flush-In. And Laverne is here to tell us the truth about who was responsible for it and why.
Thank you, Bo. Well, that was quite a time, the major flush-in. I worked at McCullough Hyde Hospital at that time while going to school. And when I got, after the flush-in, the next day, I go to work and they're very upset with me about me flushing, you know, and being a part of that flushing and flushing the big water tank up there in the middle of uptown that went dry so that no one could get water even to put out fires. And that's why they were very upset. And they said, how could you do something like that? And I said, it wasn't me that flushed the toilets. After all, I lived off campus. And then two, there were very few Blacks that lived in the dorms. That water came from all of the dorms that was around. So that's like 300 or 400 kids per dorm. They did the flush-in. So that's the truth on that.
Well, I'm glad you cleared that one up. So go back into the Miami University use of the Camelot imagery. Miami University is portrayed as a conservative, politically conservative, culturally conservative, idyllic campus, and with a very serious intellectual mission. And of course, I agree that that last part is true. In fact, it's all true. Can you imagine the advantage that Miami University has over other universities in terms of the recruitment of students, in the recruitment of faculty and administrators, because of this idyllic, conservative culture and political environment? It has worked for Miami University in that regard. It's also worked in terms of funding through the legislature, or be it through the donors class, or be it through alumni. I mean, who doesn't want to fund Camelot? Of course, everyone does, right? The Republican Speaker of the House, one of Miami's most famous alumni, is Paul Ryan. Well, Paul Ryan didn't come here to date a Black woman. Now, he did, but he knew what he was coming to, given the imagery that he was presented with in his hometown in Wisconsin. That's why he came to Miami. Another important aspect is the fact of recruiting the right kind of student, as it's called. And the right kind of student, again, is the Paul Ryan type. And he knew that, and the counselors know that. And the alumni know that because that's who they are. I would argue it's not by accident that the Greek system was founded and is celebrated in its founding here at Miami University. Because again, that's a great recruitment tool for the right kind of student, despite the fact that the Greek system, as I well know, was founded in elitist, anti-Semitic, racist, patriarchal commitments and principles. But yet again, it dominates Miami's life, social life, cultural life, for the reasons that connect us to Camelot. And finally, I would argue that this imagery of Miami University as Camelot also helped to hide until the late civil rights period, helped to hide the reality that Miami had very few, outside of the sports programs, had very few people of color, in particular, Black students attending it.
Tell them what you want. Demonstrated my experience within Oxford's Black community, largely hidden by white Oxford and Miami University's treatment and the image of Black community as monolithic, which means that we were treated all the same, but we had our differences. Some of them was good, some bad, as any other community. But in the book, class distinctions were noticed by me. For example, the North Side versus the South Side of Oxford, bad side, the good side. And I was warned by my foster mom of hostility between the two sides of town, which I later found out was not the case. One time, one of my very light-skinned friend called me chocolate drop. And that's like light skin versus dark was and still is an issue. I was too dark for some people, but look at my skin. Look at me. Isn't it a beautiful shade? In the book, I talk about being pregnant. I was a teenager. I was rejected and talked about by my Black friends, some of them, and their families. It was very hurtful for me. It pained me. And they were labeling me as a bad pregnant girl. In regards to the civil rights politics, the NAACP versus Black Power, there was a split of political views. The NAACP in Oxford was very conservative. Their approach was, don't make waves, try to just get along. We'll work it out. And the Black campus students, me, was involved in that. We wanted action and results, but we didn't want to be burning down buildings or to be destructive about it. What we really wanted was power of the mind. That's like, and what we wanted was Black courses, Black faculty that we could identify with. And not only us, but to enlighten our white brothers and sisters that was on campus. And as stated in the book, Mr. Nash, or Jax, as I reference him in my book, he was such a mentor to me. I tip my hat to him. He reminded me so many times when I would come to him to search my mind, to always be thinking, and to just tell them what you want. And I absolutely loved him for that. And God bless his memory.
Thank you, Laverne. So in conclusion, what we've tried to make a case for is that the students and citizens of Oxford and Miami University really have a choice between two imageries for their town and for their university. One of Camelot, which we've spoken about a lot today, and the other is coming from the words and images and experience of Laverne in Oxford and at Miami University. Which one you choose we'll just leave up to you in terms of which one makes sense to you. Maybe it's even in between, or maybe it's a third alternative. But that's the case we've tried to make, and we'll leave it up to you to decide which imagery, which experience is yours.
In short, tell them what you want. It is my story. It tells about my life before and after Oxford. But on this particular day, tell them what you want illuminates the different ways in which Camelot image of Oxford on purpose masks the reality of a town and a university based in racist conflict. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, Laverne. Thank you both for a very powerful and wonderful presentation. So everyone, if you have questions, please post them into the question and answer. And both of you, we have a couple questions coming in, and I'll read them to you. And if you need me to read them again, please let me know. So the first question is, I can only imagine that you both felt a sense of vulnerability while writing this book. Can you both speak on this experience while you were writing? What are some of the words of encouragement you have for those who are creating works similar to this book?
You get the first one. Oh.
Well, as a writer, I can only say be true to yourself. And if you start off with that attitude, knowing indeed it's a lonely experience, but be true to yourself. And I think, as we collaborated on this book, both of us were true to ourselves. We learned an awful lot about ourselves and about our experience in Oxford, separately and together. And if I'm writing these kinds of books, of course, be true to your experience. Don't pull any punches. Be serious about your work, and you'll just, you'll do fine, and you'll enjoy the experience. You'll laugh and you'll cry, as Laverne and I did over 200 hours of taped interviews. But it's been a wonderful collaboration, and yours will be too.
Thank you, Bo. Okay, so the next question, again, is to what extent do you think the public ivy image that Miami crafts for itself today continues to suppress people of color's voices, influence on campus? And additionally, how much do you view this as an extension of the Camelot imaginary?
I think that I think that it still continues, the Camelot image. I think it still do. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I was just discussing something with Bo last night, and I was thinking about how many years that we have been doing this in regards to this image. And I noticed that at each point in time, and you can go back to the 50s, and someone, alumni are going to be talking about the same thing that the ones in the 60s was talking about, and the ones in the 60s is talking about the same thing in the 80s, 70s and 80s, and then the 90s. And now here we are, 2022, and we're still talking about the same things, this almost the same kind of issues. You still have that feelings that I was talking about that you have where you seem out of place when you go. I've noticed that when I was there visiting, I still felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb. And so, yes, at that particular time back then, you had 2 or 3. This time, and when I was there, it was between 67 to 100 students. And I would think that probably we're not talking about 150 Black students at Miami right now. And as far as the staff, I don't think that number statistically has increased that much. So it just seems like we go back and forth within that certain amount of numbers, whether it's staffed. There may be a few more with staff, but still not enough. And so I don't think that it's growing, thank goodness. They are making progress, but I guess with me, I wanted to be a little bit quicker. So
Yeah, I would say, that, tell them what you want is a historical document. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in the contemporary situation of fighting many of the same old battles,
yes,
of having to deal with the Confederate flag, of having to work against the attempt again to suppress Black history and the Black experience. And we all know what this is about today. But so I'll tell them what you want is a historical read. It still has, unfortunately, an awful lot of relevance to today's political, cultural, economic scene.
Thank you. So Laverne, this question is for you. Can you speak, or well, Bo can definitely speak. Can you speak a bit more about the intersectionality of being Black and a foster child in Oxford? Did your experiences differ from that of your Black peers?
yes, a lot. First of all, everything is different. You don't have your mom and dad or your grandparent or family. So everything is not on a natural basis. My foster parents tried to make us feel like we were part of a family as best as they could. My foster parents were older. But I still, it didn't matter where I would go. Even in the cafeteria, I remember how I always had to show a ticket or something, or tell them out loud that I was, my lunch was free. Um, when I would, I babysit so I could get my own things so that I wouldn't have to be taken to Hamilton, to Elder Beerman with that slip of paper that said on there, sent from the welfare department, that I was allowed to have a slip today, or a sweater, or a skirt, and it had to be within a certain amount. And that's one of the reasons why I started babysitting and buying my own stuff. And then the rules, you just had to be real careful with who you're around, what you're saying and doing. And it's sort of like being the preacher's child. You just had to walk this certain image, and it seemed like, as far as I was concerned, being a foster child, you just stuck out. It just seemed like, with Oxford, maybe if I was in a city, it probably wouldn't feel so close. But being in a small town like Oxford, it seemed like everybody knew everybody's business, number one. And then number two, my foster mom was in so many clubs, social clubs. So the little tidbit gets going there. So yeah, it wasn't, it was not easy.
Yeah, I would add that one of the most illuminating discussions that I had with Laverne was about being a state kid. And I mean, she can go on and on about this, but the fact is that, as she said to me, that at school, she always had to sit by the window because she was told by, her other family members in the foster family that, you have to watch out for the police. If the police come rolling up, just assume they're coming after you
Oh,
to take
yes.
you out of school. And,
Yeah,
and so she was on pins and needles all the time, looking out for the
true,
cop cars. And
true.
that's quite a different experience, I think, for anybody who's not a state kid, whatever race you are.
Thank you for that, Bo. That is so true. That that took up a lot of the day for me, because I was split between trying to get to my studies and understand my studies, and still be looking out the window. Oh, I used to hate it when the police would come up there. I just knew they were coming for me. And because that's the way they took the kids. They would come send for you. And I just hated it. I hated it.
We also have a chapter where she is pregnant, and to have her final checkout, she has to go to the state doctors, and they were trying to convince her to have an abortion, and she didn't want to have an abortion. But again, she didn't have any choice in terms of her medical care. It was going to be the state and the white state, frankly. It wasn't going to be anybody else. She didn't have any choice as a state kid.
But they also knew that when they told me that they were going to do that, wanted to do that, but the one said, I don't think that we should, because she's pretty smart. And later on, we would probably regret doing that. And I know they would.
They certainly would.
Thank you both. I just don't know, sharing your life, to for everybody open like that. It has to be very impactful for you. We do have lots of good questions coming in. This one, do you have plan to give more talks like the present one at other institutions or any other venues?
We hadn't talked about it.
If we're invited, we'll be happy to share
Yes.
Laverne's experiences because, again, even though it's a historical document, it has unfortunately such relevance for today. And we think that not only white people and Black people need to know their own history and what went on during that period, in particular the subtle forms of racism, which are pretty blatant now. You know, we're past the legal issue of whether a Black person can live in live in the town or go swimming in a swimming pool or go to the movie theater. But as Laverne has said time and time again, you know, we know we're not welcome. And I think, you know, yes, we would be delighted to give more talks because we think it's an important period in our lives that people need to know their own history.
Yes. Yes, I agree.
Thank you. The next question is, the presentation has emphasized the setting of Oxford. For me, the book was more about your spirit to overcome or a horrific childhood. How do these two forces shape you in your journey? I'm sorry.
You said abuse, right?
I'll reread it. I'm sorry. The
Okay.
presentation has emphasized the setting of Oxford so for this questioner, the book was more about your spirit to overcome a horrific childhood. How do these two forces shape you in your journey?
A lot. And also it gave really, I don't even know in my little body where all of that came from. Probably from the Lord. But I do know that whenever that feeling inside of me comes up against something that seems greater than me, to not be able to do something or to do something, I'm going to do it. It's just like it just takes over me. And so all of the things that happened to me that's talked about in that book, it was like my back is against the wall and I need to fight. So I would fight for my life. I was always fighting for my life. And the spirit came as the spirit came. That's all I can tell you, is that the spirit came because it was so deep down in me. From the time I was born, I was fighting to live, fighting to exist, to be there, to be a part of. And to this day, I'm the same way.
Thank you, Laverne. So, and Bo addressed this a little bit ago, but so what advice would you have for starting conversations about ongoing social justice issues within a family structure that is not overly tolerant or open to such conversations?
Well, I'll try that one. Families are difficult, as we all know. And you just try to present ideas, you try to present them in a certain way that is inclusion and not rejection. you try to make the case as best you can with the people that you love. You may not like them. I mean, that's the essence of family values, frankly. We love people that we don't really like, and we like them to be different, and we like them to be more concerned about a society and less about themselves. We can see that going on today. I mean, having discussions about the pandemic and about ivermectin and about vaccinations. I mean, this is going on and it's very, very difficult, particularly because we live in a society where individuals matter most, or at least they're supposed to. So the notion of commonality, of common grounds, of common interests and common concerns, today is sort of under siege. And it's split families, it's split relationships, non-family relationships. I know that from my own experience in the last couple of years. So you just have to keep digging at it. You have to persevere. You have to be a Laverne Merritt-Gordon, and persevere. And at a certain point, it may be that you have to, as we say, divorce our family in certain ways. But again, it's worth the effort. And you have to see how people are going to how they respond to it. And if they respond in a healthy way and you made a healthy argument, then lucky you. But it's a hard thing to do.
Thank you, Bo. So just give it a few minutes if we get any other questions coming in. And it's a form of a question. I'm going to go ahead and read it. And if you feel how you want to respond to it. It's Miami in the time of President Haney used to suggest to Black students that it was better to live off campus with a family rather than in a dorm. He seemed very resistant to integration on campus. Just wondering if the attitudes improved under President Millett. And if you have any thoughts on that.
Is this for me?
Well, it has to be because I wasn't here.
Yeah.
I'm an OU Bobcat.
Okay.
I'm an OU Bobcat. Hey.
Okay. During that time, when I was there, there were some kids that were Black students that were in some of the girls in some of the dorms. Not that, because like I said, there was only like between 67 when I came in, I think. And then by the time I left, I think we had 80 something to 100. And of course, that number didn't stay constant because they were either, leaving or whatever. But most of the athletes stayed in the dorms. And, but we were encouraged. I do remember students living off campus, and but I can't say that I heard them saying that they were encouraged to live off campus. A lot of them just wanted to live off campus because they could have more freedom. And so my living off campus was because of the fact that I was a mom. And so I had my own place. And I can't tell you really why some of them lived off campus or was on campus, and whether they were asked to live off campus or not. I can't tell you that.
Okay, and so one of my wonderful colleagues, obviously being in libraries, I love the question. Can you talk about how the library supported you, Laverne, when you were young in Oxford? Bo, your experience with libraries in Oxford?
Is this question to me?
Yeah.
Yes.
And
how the library supported you when you were young.
Oh, oh my goodness. Huh. So much. To this day, I love libraries. And I want to share, I don't think this was in the story, but I remember as a kid, how, just to show you how much I love reading, on the days that I couldn't get to the library and I had read everything that was around, I would read labels off the cans of canned goods, packages, whatever, just to be reading. And so when I would go to the public library, which I started early, the librarians they were just so wonderful. They helped me. They really helped to expand me. I think they knew where I was in my head, and that I needed to read. I needed to expand my horizons, just to get to know the world and travel vicariously through books. That's what they told me, that I could go anywhere in the world that I wanted to go by reading. It was just very magical for me. And that's what they instilled in me. And so allowing me to go to Miami University's library, oh my gosh, that was absolutely wonderful. That was like eating the best ice cream cone in the world. And I got to do it. I could spend as much time as I wanted to. There was never any restrictions. And here I am, this kid going over to a college, a university's library, and they have all of these books, and I just ate it up. It was a wonderful experience. I love libraries.
Yeah, in my family, an academic family, of course, we were the culture, the intellectual culture, just libraries were part of our lives. We always had a stack of books. We were always going, and again, because I was a professor kid, I had access to the Miami University Library. It's just, and of course, to me as an academic, libraries are just a quiet place where you can go, and as Laverne says, you can travel the world. You can see what you want to see. And it's just a place of peace and quiet, but learning, and
Yes,
learning about everything, depending on
absolutely.
your interest. It's there, and so I mean that's just part of how I grew up, and thanks to my parents, of course. And I just hope every parent has. I know libraries are under attack now and the books and all that, but we'll get through that, because you can't do without books. You can't do without
No,
libraries
right.
and call yourself a civilized society. You just can't.
Well said. Thank you both. Okay, well, we're coming to the end of our hour. I want to thank you again, Bo and Laverne. Thank you so much for sharing your stories, sharing your thoughts, answering questions. And I put the link into the book available out there. Thank you again from Miami University Libraries, for Miami University, and making and keeping as we celebrate and honor Black History Month, a successful event.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we hope
Thank you.
the rest of your events are successful as well. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It has been a great pleasure for both of us. I speak for both of us, right, Bo? It has been absolutely
always
wonderful.